The silence within the grand ossuary of the Zalarthian hegemony was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a heavy, oppressive tapestry woven from the gravity of 1,000 conquered worlds and the suffocating arrogance of a species that had forgotten the taste of fear. The chamber itself was a masterpiece of architectural dominance, a vast, spherical hollow carved from the heart of a rogue moon, lined with obsidian and veins of pulsating, violet bioluminescence that served as the only illumination. Here, the High Synod gathered, their tall, slender forms draped in robes of woven starlight, their chitinous faces unreadable masks of serene cruelty. They floated in the zero-gravity center of the chamber, arranged in concentric circles that represented the hierarchy of their dominion, with the High Exarch Valkyr suspended at the very epicenter. His eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation, but was, in truth, a deep communion with the vast sensor networks that spanned the spiral arm of the galaxy. The air was recycled, scrubbed of all impurities, smelling faintly of ozone and ancient dust. A sterile environment for a sterile morality that viewed organic chaos as a disease to be cured by the cold steel of hegemony order. They persist, Valkyr's voice resonated not through the air but directly into the neural shunts of the gathered counselors, a telepathic broadcast that carried the weight of absolute command. The primates of Sol, the scavengers, they persist despite the blockade, despite the resource starvation, despite the logical impossibility of their survival. A ripple of discomfort moved through the outer circles of the Synod. It was a subtle thing, a shifting of robes, a flickering of the violet lights, but in the stillness of the ossuary, it was as violent as a scream. To mention the humans was distasteful. To acknowledge their survival was an admission of inefficiency, and in the hegemony, inefficiency was the only true sin. Counselor Xylia, a being of sharp angles and sharper intellect who oversaw the logistics and resource allocation division, drifted slightly forward, her movements graceful and predatory. "High Exarch," she projected, her mental tone colored with a mixture of disdain and clinical curiosity. "The persistence of the Terran Union is a statistical anomaly, yes, but it is hardly a threat. We have trapped them in their home system. We have stripped their colonies. We have denied them access to hyperalloys, zero-point energy cores, and the refined phasic crystals necessary for warp-capable dreadnoughts. They are trapped in a gravity well with nothing but the debris of their own failed expansions and the wreckage of the minor skirmishes we allowed them to lose. They are not building a fleet. They are suffocating in their own waste." Valkyr opened his eyes. They were multifaceted, shimmering like black diamonds, reflecting the violet glow of the chamber. "And yet," he replied, the thought dragging out like a blade across stone, "the deep space buoys on the perimeter of the Sol blockade have detected energy signatures. Not the clean, harmonic resonance of hegemony technology, nor the crude fission pulses of primitive species. It is discordant, jagged. A chaotic scream of radiation and kinetic stress that defies our understanding of naval architecture. They are building something, Xylia, and they are building it out of the very refuse we left them to die in." The concept was absurd to the hegemony mind. Their ships were works of art, grown in orbital foundries from single crystals of molecularly bonded alloys, seamless, silent, and deadly. War to them was an equation of aesthetics and efficiency. To build a ship from scavenged parts from the junk of destroyed vessels and orbital debris was not just impossible, it was offensive. It violated the fundamental laws of structural integrity and warp dynamics. How could a vessel hold together in the shearing forces of hyperspace if it was a patchwork of welded plates and mismatched engines? "It is a desperate final gasp," argued General Thrax, the supreme commander of the hegemony's purification fleets. His mental voice was a roar of controlled aggression. "They are welding steel plates to freighter hulls. They are strapping unstable fusion drives to mining barges. Let them come. Let them bring their floating landfills to the border. My lances will carve them apart before their sensors can even resolve our position. It will be a mercy, Exarch. To end their pathetic struggle and reclaim the biomass of their world for the greater good of the hegemony." But Valkyr was not so easily placated. He had ruled for 400 cycles, and he had seen civilizations rise and fall. He knew that desperation was a potent fuel, one that the hegemony in its comfort and superiority had long since forgotten how to refine. "You see trash, Thrax," the Exarch murmured, the violet lights dimming in sympathy with his darkening mood. "You see a species wallowing in the mud, but I have watched the humans. Unlike us, they do not discard. When a machine breaks, they fix it. When a hull shatters, they reforge it. They possess a philosophy of resilience that is alien to our perfection. We replace, they adapt. We purge, they endure, prepare the grand fleet. We do not wait for them to break the blockade. We will enter the Sol system and witness this junk fleet for ourselves. If it is, as you say, a parade of refuse, we shall burn it. But if it is something else, if their madness has birthed a new logic, then we must be ready. The order was absolute. The ossuary hummed with the sudden increase in data traffic as the command rippled out to the stellar anchorages. Across the sector, thousands of hegemony warships began to wake, their sleek, pearlescent hulls catching the light of distant stars, their engines glowing with the soft blue hue of singularity drives. They were the pinnacle of evolution, the apex of technological achievement. Against them stood humanity, a species isolated, starved of resources, and left to rot in the graveyard of their own solar system. The narrative was set. The outcome was mathematically certain, or so the hegemony believed. As the fleet moved, slipping through the folds of space with the ease of a needle passing through silk, the perspective shifted to the sensory nets of the blockade runners. The journey to Sol was instantaneous for the crew, but for the universe, it was a displacement of mass that sent gravitational ripples warning of their approach. When the hegemony fleet reverted to real space on the edge of the Uit cloud, they expected silence. They expected to see a cowering system, perhaps a few desperate pickets of retrofitted shuttles trying to flee. Instead, they found the fog. The Sol system was not empty. The space between the outer planets was filled with a dense, swirling field of particulate matter, metallic dust, and interference so thick it blinded the long-range scanners of the hegemony flagships. It was a smokescreen, but one on a stellar scale, created by pulverizing asteroids and seeding the vacuum with reflective chaff. Visuals only, General Thrax commanded from the bridge of the Symphony of Order, his flagship. They try to hide in the dirt. Standard cowardly tactics, push the fleet forward, sweep the debris aside with deflector fields. The hegemony armada, a shimmering wall of white and gold, advanced into the cloud. The silence of the void was replaced by the constant pinging of debris against their shields, a rhythmic drumming that sounded like rain on a roof. It was irritating, messy, and undignified. Thrax watched the tactical plot, watching for the red icons that would denote enemy vessels. "Contact," the sensor officer announced, his voice tinged with confusion. "Directly ahead. Range 10,000 kilometers. Mass, reading is indeterminate. It creates a gravitational shadow, but the hull configuration is nonsensical." Thrax peered at the main view screen. Through the swirling dust, a shape began to emerge. It was not a ship in any sense that the hegemony understood. It had no symmetry. It had no smooth lines. It was a mountain of metal, a jagged, hulking accumulation of parts that looked less like a vessel and more like a floating city of wreckage. It was immense. The sheer scale of it dwarfed the hegemony capital ships. The hull was a patchwork quilt of mismatched armor plates, some rusted, some scorched, some gleaming with the dull sheen of lead. There were sections that looked like they had been ripped from atmospheric skyscrapers, girders still attached. There were engines bolted onto engines, massive exhaust ports clustered like organ pipes, and antenna arrays that looked like forests of dead trees. It was ugly. It was hideous. It was the junk ship the humans had promised. Laughter rippled through the bridge crew of the Symphony. "Look at it," Xylia sneered, projecting her thought from the synod chamber to the fleet. "They have welded garbage scows together. It will break apart under its own thrust. They have no containment fields, no grav-plating integration. It is a tomb." "Hail them," Thrax ordered, a cruel smile touching his mandibles. "Let us hear their begging before we vaporize that eyesore." The channel opened. The audio that came through was not the crisp digital clarity of hegemony comms. It was filled with static, the whine of feedback, and the heavy, rhythmic thrum of industrial machinery. Then a voice cut through the noise. It was not begging. It was calm, deep, and sounded weary, like a man who had been working a double shift at a foundry for 1,000 years. "This is the United Terran vessel Hephaestus," the voice said. "You are entering sovereign human space. Your blockade is illegal. Your aggression is noted. Turn back, or we will be forced to dismantle you." Thrax laughed, a barking, harsh sound. "Dismantle us with what, that pile of scrap you have?" "No weapons, human. You have a floating junkyard. We are the hegemony. We possess the energy of stars. You possess rust." "Rust is just oxidized iron," the human voice replied, strangely philosophical. "It remembers the oxygen. It remembers the history. We do not throw things away, General. We find a use for everything, even the things you broke, especially the things you broke." Fire, Thrax commanded, bored with the conversation. Burn it from the sky. The Symphony of Order and its escorts unleashed a volley of antimatter lances, beams of pure white destruction that crossed the distance in a microsecond. They struck the flank of the Hephaestus. The hegemony crew waited for the explosion. They waited for the catastrophic hull failure, the venting of atmosphere, the shattering of the primitive welds. Instead, the beams hit the junk armor and stopped. There was no explosion. The mismatched plates of the human ship glowed, shifting from dull gray to a vibrant, angry cherry red, and then, impossibly, the energy seemed to spread out, running along the seams of the welds like water in a canal system. The energy didn't penetrate. It was absorbed, conducted, and dissipated into massive heat sinks that vented plumes of superheated plasma into the void. "Report," Thrax shouted, his composure cracking. "Why is it not destroyed?" "The armor," the sensor officer stammered, his fingers flying across his console. It is not standard alloy. The outer layer is composed of ablative tiles scavenged from precursor ruins. And underneath, sir, the structural analysis indicates the hull is reinforced with condensed carbon weaves taken from the orbital elevators we destroyed during the first siege. It's incredibly dense. And the geometry, the jagged surface, scatters the coherent beams. We are not hitting a flat surface, we are hitting a fractal trap. On the view screen, the Hephaestus began to move. And as it moved, it changed. The junk was not static. Massive sections of the hull shifted on hydraulic pistons the size of skyscrapers. Panels slid back to reveal not sleek energy ports, but dark, gaping maws. "You call this junk?" The human voice returned, harder now, the weariness replaced by the cold steel of resolve. "We call it the archive. Every plate on this ship was taken from a home you burned. Every beam was salvaged from a station you shattered. This isn't just a warship, General. It's a monument to your sins, and we built it to return them to you." From the dark maws of the Hephaestus, objects were launched. They were not energy beams. They were physical projectiles. Massive, solid slugs of tungsten and depleted uranium, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by magnetic rails that ran the entire length of the 12-kilometer ship. The hegemony shields were designed to disperse energy weapons. They were frequency modulated to deflect lasers and plasma. They were not designed to stop a 100-ton rod of metal moving at relativistic speeds. The first slug struck the escort cruiser Light of Purity. The kinetic impact was so great that it didn't just penetrate the shield. It shattered the shield generator through brute force feedback. The slug punched through the prow of the cruiser and exited the stern, carrying the ship's reactor core out with it into the void. The cruiser crumpled like a tin can stepped on by a giant, then detonated in silence. Thrax stared, his mind unable to process the brutality of the physics. Kinetic artillery? Nobody uses kinetic artillery. It is primitive. It is barbaric. "It is effective," the human captain replied. The battle that followed was not a graceful dance of starships. It was a brawl. The hegemony fleet, designed for long-range energy duels and surgical strikes, found itself trapped in the gravity well of the massive human vessel, battered by a storm of physical matter. The Hephaestus was a tank, a brawler. It took hits that would have vaporized a standard warship, its redundant systems and over-engineered bulk absorbing the damage. When a section of armor was blown away, there was another layer beneath it, and another. It was a ship built with the philosophy that survival was not about avoiding the hit, but about enduring it. Inside the ossuary, the High Synod watched in horror as their pristine fleet was dismantled by the flying junkyard. "This is impossible," Counselor Xylia whispered. "Where are they getting the power? Railguns of that caliber require massive energy spikes. Their fusion reactors shouldn't be able to cycle that fast." Exarch Valkyr leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Zoom in on Sector 4 of their hull, the section that looks like lattice work." The view screen magnified the image. Amidst the rusted plates and welded girders, there was a section of the ship that looked different. It was a complex, geometric web of silver and black metal, pulsating with a strange, rhythmic light. "That is not human technology," Valkyr said softly. "That Ethel Guardian. That is the wreckage of the Sundrinker, the dreadnought that vanished in the Perseus arm 3,000 cycles ago." A silence deeper than the void fell over the council. The Ethelgard were the old gods, the progenitors of the sector, a race that had ascended to pure energy millennia ago. Their technology was sacred, forbidden, and thought to be lost. They didn't just scavenge their own dead. Valkyr realized, a chill running through his ethereal form. They scavenged the graveyard of the galaxy. That ship, it has components from the Ethelgard, the Cygnus Raiders, the Void-born. They have integrated technology that we were too afraid to even touch. We called it heresy. They called it spare parts. Back in the Sol system, the Hephaestus was closing the distance. The hegemony fleet was in disarray. The beautiful, fragile ships were breaking under the relentless kinetic hammering. But the humans did not fire to exterminate. They fired to disable. They targeted engines, weapon mounts, sensor arrays. General Thrax, the human voice came again. Your flagship is venting plasma. Your shields are at 12%. We have a firing solution on your bridge. We suggest you power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. We are not here to kill you. We are here to talk. But we prefer to talk when you are not shooting at us. Thrax, humiliated and beaten by a ship made of refuse, looked at his trembling crew. He looked at the monster filling his view screen, a grotesque, terrifying mosaic of history and violence. He realized then that the junk was a disguise. The humans had not built a warship. They had built a hammer, and they had forged it in the fires of their own desperation. "Stand down," Thrax whispered. "Power down the systems." The surrender of the hegemony fleet was unprecedented in galactic history. As the weapons of the Symphony of Order went dark, the Hephaestus ceased its bombardment. Smaller vessels, looking like retrofitted shuttles and heavy-duty tugs, detached from the massive hull of the mother ship and began to approach the disabled alien vessels. The scene shifted to the interior of the hegemony flagship. The corridors, usually pristine white and silent, were now bathed in the red glow of emergency lighting. General Thrax stood in the airlock reception hall, flanked by his honor guard. He expected the humans to storm in like barbarians, armored in scrap metal, hooting and looting. The airlock cycled, steam hissed, the heavy blast doors groaned open. Through the mist walked three figures. They were not wearing power armor made of scrap. They were wearing pressure suits of sleek utilitarian design, dark gray with magnetic boots that clamped to the deck with a solid thud. They removed their helmets. The leader was a woman of advancing years, her hair gray and cropped short, her face lined with the deep grooves of stress and sorrow, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and fiercely calm. This was Admiral Vance. Flanking her were two younger officers, one holding a datapad, the other holding nothing but standing with a relaxed, lethal alertness. "General," Vance said, her voice the same one that had broadcast over the comms. She didn't shout, she didn't gloat. She spoke with the quiet authority of a teacher correcting a wayward student. "I am Admiral Elena Vance of the Terran Engineering Corps. We have medical teams standing by to assist your wounded. Our mechanics can also help stabilize your reactor core before it goes critical. We noticed your containment field fluctuates in the lower harmonic bands, a design flaw." Thrax blinked, his mandibles twitching. "You offer aid, you just destroyed half my fleet." "We disabled your fleet," Vance corrected. "If we wanted to destroy you, we would have used the Ethelgard singularity driver we found in the wreck of the Sun Drinker. But that seemed excessive, and we try not to waste energy." "You use the technology of the old gods as a weapon?" Thrax asked, horrified. "That is sacrilege, that is forbidden tech." "It was floating in an asteroid belt, leaking radiation that was poisoning a mining colony," Vance shrugged. "We cleaned it up, we fixed it, we integrated it. We didn't know it was a god, we just knew it was a high-yield power coupling that fit the socket." She stepped closer, and the height difference between the towering alien and the human woman seemed to vanish under the weight of her presence. "General, look at your ship. It is beautiful. It is perfect. And because it is perfect, it is fragile. You cannot repair it in the field because you need a dry dock and molecular printers. If a system fails, you are helpless." She gestured back toward the airlock, toward the looming bulk of the Hephaestus visible through the viewport. "My ship is ugly. It rattles, it leaks, it groans, but it works. Because it is built from the lessons of failure. Every scar on that hull is a lesson we survived. You thought you could starve us out, you though. But blocking our trade routes would end us. You forgot who we are. We are humans. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We built civilization out of mud and sticks. When you gave us trash, you didn't insult us. You gave us resources." Thrax looked at her, truly seeing the humans for the first time. He saw the pragmatism, the terrifying adaptability. He realized that the hegemony's obsession with purity and perfection was a stagnation, while the humans' chaotic embrace of the broken and the discarded was a form of rapid evolution. "Why?" Thrax asked, his voice low. Why surrender? You have the upper hand, you could push to the core worlds, you could threaten the Synod. Because we don't want to rule you, Vance said, her expression softening slightly. And we don't want to fight you. We have seen what war does. We live in the wreckage of it. We built our ship out of it so we would never forget. She pulled a small device from her pocket. It was a holographic projector, old and scratched. She placed it on the floor between them. We didn't just build a warship, General. We built an antenna, a very, very big antenna. The Hephaestus isn't just armor and guns. The entire superstructure is a receiver array. Receiving what? A signal, Vance said, from outside the galaxy. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from post-battle tension to cosmic dread. Vance activated the projector. A star map appeared, showing the galactic disk, but at the edge, in the dark void between galaxies, there was a red stain, a shadow. We found logs in the Ethelgard wreckage, Vance explained. The old gods didn't ascend, they didn't leave because they were bored, they ran from that. She pointed to the red shadow. It's a swarm, a biological imperative that consumes stellar energy. It's coming here, it's been coming for 10,000 years. The Ethelgard tried to fight it with their perfect ships and their perfect science, and they lost. They were shattered. The wreckage we found, that wasn't from a civil war, that was a crime scene. Thrax stared at the map. The strategic implications hit him like a physical blow. The hegemony had spent centuries policing the borders, suppressing lesser races, maintaining order, all while a tsunami of death approached from the dark. Our sensors, they never picked this up, Thrax murmured. Because you were looking for order, Vance said. You filter out the noise, you look for patterns, but this threat, it looks like static. It looks like chaos. We saw it because we live in the noise. We saw it because our equipment isn't calibrated for perfection, it's calibrated for survival. So you built the Hephaestus, Thrax said, the realization dawning on him. We needed a ship tough enough to stand on the line, Vance nodded. And we need you, we need your fleets. Your perfect, high-output energy weapons are useless against hull plating, as you saw, but against a biological swarm, against soft tissue and organic ships, they will be devastating. We are the shield, General. We are the wall of iron and rust that will take the beating. You are the sword, you are the fire. She extended a hand, a primitive, biological gesture of trust. We can continue this war. I can dismantle your fleet, and we can spend the next 10 years fighting over the scraps while that shadow eats the stars. Or we can stop measuring whose hull is shinier and we can start welding. We have the designs for the Ethelgard refits. We can upgrade your ships with the kinetic plating. We can show you how to build ugly, strong things. Thrax looked at the hand. He looked at the map. He looked at the Hephaestus, the monstrous, magnificent abomination that had humiliated his armada. He saw the logic. He saw the necessity, and for the first time in his life he saw the beauty in imperfection. The Synod will not accept this easily, Thrax said, but he did not pull away. The Synod is logical, Vance countered. Survival is the ultimate logic. Take me to them. Let me show them the math. Let me show them the graveyard of the Ethelgard. Thrax slowly reached out and took the human's hand. It was warm, calloused, and firm. Very well, Admiral. We will go to the ossuary, but I warn you, the High Exarch is not fond of rust. He'll get used to it, Vance said with a faint smile. Everyone does eventually. Act 3, the unity of rust and starlight. The arrival of the Hephaestus in orbit above the hegemony throne world was an event that shattered the psychological foundations of the Zalarthian populace. For millennia, they had looked up and seen only the delicate, filigreed orbital rings and the silent patrol of the golden fleets. Now, hanging in the sky like a bruised moon was the Terran Colossus. It blocked the sun. It cast a shadow that was jagged and complex. It was a physical reminder that the universe was rough, untamed, and dangerous. Admiral Vance stood in the center of the grand ossuary. Why she had not dressed in ceremonial robes. She wore her uniform, clean but worn. She stood before High Exarch Valkyr and the assembled Synod. The atmosphere was no longer one of arrogant dismissal. It was electric with fear and curiosity. General Thrax stood beside her, his own armor scorched from the battle, a visual testament to the truth of his report. He had spoken for 3 hours, detailing the engagement, the failure of their weapons, and the revelation of the Ethelgard threat. You ask us to ally with scavengers, Valkyr said, his voice echoing in the minds of all present. You ask us to pollute our fleets with this retrotech, to weld dead metal to living alloy. I ask you to live, Vance said aloud, her voice amplified by a portable speaker she had set up on the floor, another piece of human practicality that bypassed the Synod's neural network. Your perfection is your weakness, Exarch. You have specialized so much that you have lost the ability to adapt. Evolution is not a straight line to perfection. It is a messy, chaotic struggle to survive. We are that struggle. And the Ethelgard? Valkyr asked. You claim to possess their knowledge. We possess their mistakes, Vance corrected. And their final solution. The Sundrinker wasn't just a ship, it was a seed. We found the blueprints in its core. It was designed to create a localized hyperspatial rupture, a firebreak in space. If the swarm comes, we can't just shoot them. There are too many. We have to burn the bridge they are crossing. We have to detonate the hyperlanes. That would isolate this sector for 1,000 years, Counselor Xylia gasped. Trade, communication, expansion, all ended. Better isolated than extinct, Vance said flatly. We are prepared to make that sacrifice. We are used to being cut off. We are used to making do with what we have. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air. The hegemony had never known hardship. They had never known lack. The idea of being trapped in their own sector without the infinite resources of the galaxy was terrifying. But the alternative, the red shadow on the map, was oblivion. Valkyr looked at the human. He saw the weary resolve, the strength that came not from technology but from spirit. He realized that the humans were not the younger race. In terms of suffering, in terms of endurance, they were ancient. They had lived 1,000 lifetimes of struggle in the time it took the hegemony to perfect a single warp coil. We accept, Valkyr said, the words heavy with resignation and a strange new respect. Teach us your engineering. Show us how to build the wall. The following months were a frenzy of activity, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The cultural clash was absolute. Hegemony engineers, used to working in silence with sterile nanobots, found themselves working alongside human grease monkeys who used impact wrenches, plasma torches, and profanity as primary tools. At first, there was friction. The hegemony officers looked with horror as humans cut holes in pristine bulkheads to route auxiliary power cables. They gagged at the smell of welding ozone and hydraulic fluid. But then, they saw the results. They saw a hegemony cruiser crippled during a training accident, repaired in 6 hours by a human crew using spare parts from a mining drone. It was ugly, the weld lines were visible, but the ship flew. It fought. It worked. Slowly, a new aesthetic began to emerge. The sleek gold of the hegemony ships began to sport patches of gray steel. Armor plates were bolted over delicate sensor fins. The Symphony of Order, Thrax's flagship, was the first to undergo a full refit. The humans installed a massive kinetic rail cannon along its spine, a junk weapon that looked barbaric against the pearl-white hull. But when Thrax test-fired it, shattering a rogue moon in the outer system, the hegemony crew cheered. They felt the recoil. They felt the power of pure mass. The Hephaestus became the hub of this new alliance. It sat in the center of the fleet, a mother hen surrounded by her strange, hybrid chicks. Admiral Vance and General Thrax worked side by side in the war room, a chamber that was now a mix of Zalarthian holographic tanks and Terran paper maps pinned to tables. Then the signal changed. Contact, the sensor officer on the Hephaestus called out. Deep range, extragalactic vector, it's the swarm, they are accelerating. The red shadow had arrived. The combined fleet moved to the edge of the galactic rim. It was a magnificent, terrifying sight. 10,000 ships. Half of them were hegemony vessels, now scarred and modified. Half were Terran junk ships, bulky and grim. Together they formed a wall of metal and will. The swarm emerged from the dark. They were not ships. They were biological leviathans, distinct entities the size of cities, made of flesh and bone and void-hardened carapace. They poured into the system like a tide of insects, millions of them. Blocking out the stars. Open fire, Vance and Thrax ordered in unison. The battle was the apocalypse writ large. The hegemony energy lances, now amplified by human dirty reactor spikes, cut swaths of fire through the organic mass. The Terran railguns hammered the Leviathans, shattering their carapaces, turning them into mist. The Hephaestus was in the thick of it. The great junk ship groaned under the strain, its hull battered by acidic spores and biological boarding pods. But it held. The junk armor, the layers of history, absorbed the punishment. It was a fortress of refuse, unbreakable because it had already been broken 1,000 times. But the swarm was endless. For every Leviathan they killed, 10 more took its place. The line began to buckle. We can't hold them, Thrax shouted over the roar of the battle. There is too much mass. The fire break, Vance said, wiping blood from her forehead. We have to detonate the Hephaestus. Thrax froze. What? That was not the plan. You said we would use the Sundrinker drive to create the rupture. The Sundrinker drive is integrated into my ship's core, General, Vance said calmly. It can't be ejected. I always knew this was a one-way trip for the Hephaestus. It's an archive, remember. And sometimes history has to be sacrificed to save the future. You cannot, Thrax argued, a strange desperation in his voice. He had grown fond of the ugly, indomitable ship. It is your home, it is your flagship. It's just things, General, Vance said, her hand hovering over the master override. Metal, plastic, glass, we can build new ships. We can't build new people. Get your fleet clear. Pull back to the secondary line. We will draw them in and detonate the core. I will not leave you, Thrax said. You have to, Vance said, looking him in the eye. You have to tell them that the junk ship saved the galaxy. Tell them that perfection isn't enough. Go. She initiated the sequence. The Hephaestus began to glow, not the clean blue of the hegemony, but a violent, unstable gold, the color of a dying sun. The gravitational waves coming off the ship were so intense they began to crush the nearby swarm vessels. Thrax, his heart heavy with a sorrow he had never thought capable of feeling for a lesser species, ordered the retreat. The Allied fleet pulled back, firing wildly to cover their withdrawal. The swarm, sensing the massive energy spike, converged on the Hephaestus. They swarmed over it, burying the mountain of metal in a sea of writhing flesh. They thought they were consuming a meal. They were swallowing a grenade. This is Admiral Vance to all ships. The transmission came, static-heavy but clear. It has been an honor. Remember, nothing is ever truly lost. It just changes shape. The Hephaestus detonated. It was not an explosion of fire. It was a rupture of reality. The Ethelgard drive, overcharged by the human reactors, collapsed the local spacetime into a singularity, then inverted it. A shockwave of pure white nothingness expanded outward, erasing everything it touched. The swarm, millions of entities, were simply deleted from existence. The hyperlanes leading to the outer dark were severed, burned shut by the release of energy. The light faded, the silence returned. Where the swarm and the Hephaestus had been, there was now a scar in the fabric of space, a swirling nebula of cooling gas and debris, a barrier that no ship could cross. The galaxy was safe, isolated but safe. On the bridge of the Symphony of Order, General Thrax stood at attention. The entire bridge crew, Zalarthian and human alike, stood with him. They watched the nebula. They are gone, Counselor Xylia whispered, tears streaming down her face, an emotion she had not felt in centuries. No, Thrax said, look. He pointed to the sensors. Amidst the chaos of the nebula, amidst the radiation and the dust, there was a signal. It was faint, it was rhythmic, it was the sound of a hammer striking metal. Clang, clang, clang. A distress beacon? Xylia asked. No, Thrax smiled, a gesture that cracked his chitinous face wide. That is a construction signal. The core survived. The Citadel survived. They are in the drift, but they are alive. He turned to his crew. Plot a course into the nebula. Sir, the helmsman asked. That is a debris field. It is hazardous. It is full of junk. Exactly, Thrax said, his voice ringing with the pride of a new era. We are not going to just rescue them. We are going to help them rebuild. We are going to scrounge. We are going to weld. And we are going to build a fleet that will make the stars themselves tremble. The Symphony of Order fired its engines. It did not glide smoothly. The new kinetic plating rattled. The welded struts groaned. It was not perfect. It was beautiful. And as they entered the cloud of wreckage, the humans and the aliens, united by rust and starlight, began the work of the future. They realized finally that the universe was not a place of static perfection to be preserved, but a garden of chaos to be tended, where the broken things were often the strongest, and where even a warship built from junk could carry the hope of a civilization. The end was not a conclusion, but a welding spark, the first of many.